Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm playing in the Tier 8 Japanese premium medium tank. It is the STA-2, and today's video is going to be focusing on hopefully gaining a third mark of excellence on the STA-2. You can currently see I have 2 hatchets on the barrel of this tank. Hopefully by the end of this video we might have the third. Now of course, when you've reached your second mark of excellence, you've probably got a really good idea of how the vehicle handles. You know that the strengths of the STA-2 are its mobility, its gun handling, and the fact that its rate of fire on the 90mm main armament are not too bad, and it has great penetration on the standard shells, 212 to be exact, and if you do dab that 2 key, well, you have 275mm of penetration, which is actually excellent. Having those heat rounds does allow you to engage the more heavily armored targets that we're seeing becoming very, very frequent in World of Tanks. You can engage them effectively with the premium rounds on the STA-2, which is something that not a lot of the other Tier 8 premium medium tanks have. A lot of them are using APCR, and of course APCR, the penetration dips over long range, whereas the heat rounds stay the same but of course have limited normalization, but they kind of penetrate up to 85 degrees anyway, so normalization isn't really an issue. It's more of a fact that if you do hit spaced armor with your heat rounds, then they can quite often be worse than the standard armor piercing rounds on this vehicle. So the STA-2, while it does have a really good top speed limit, 55 kilometers an hour to be exact, and its ground resistances are okay, its power to weight ratio is just under 17. So while you can make it up slopes at a medium speed, you're not really going to be getting there rather fast. Now of course, when you start to try and push for a third mark of excellence in a tank like this, quite often it's about starting to turn your aggression up. One of the easiest ways I've found, and I've been really, I guess, starting to even think about maximizing my damage and my spotting in games and my assistance damage, and that really is the key. It's very hard in a vehicle with quite poor DPM, such as the STA-2, 1920 to be exact. Now, when I say that's poor, it's not bad for a Tier 8 medium, but pretty much all Tier 8 mediums do have rather low DPM, and it's not until you step up to Tier 9 that you see a big jump in the damage potential of the vehicle, or at least being able to get the damage out quickly. And so what I found is that you really want to try and maximize your assistance damage, because of course, with regards to Mark of Excellence, 1 point of spotting is just as valuable as 1 point of damage. When it comes to experience, however, 1 point of spotting is only about half the value of the point of damage you could deal if you were spotting for yourself. So if you're going for something like the ranked battles where experience is just so important, then of course still dealing damage to the targets will push you towards that top 3 where hopefully you're going to be getting your chevrons even in your losing games. But here you might have noticed that the first shot I fired against that Oni was the tracks. And that's because I was hoping of holding him in place while all of these tank destroyers towards the north of my position would be able to finish him off. But that simply wasn't the case, and so I'm going to try and bait a shot out from this Oni. Now the Oni, a Tier 7 Japanese heavy tank, is most likely to be using the derpy gun on that vehicle. But even if he isn't, I think he's starting to pack either 300 or 330 millimeters damage per shot, but it does sound like he is using the derp. Now I decide to go through his lower plate because nobody seems to be shooting him on my team, but maybe that was a bit of a mistake, as now the shells fly directly past him. Doesn't look like they're hitting him very flush. Whoa! Until the Comet Amaraks him. Of all tanks to Amarak a tank, I wouldn't think it would be the Comet. Oh, the T-34 puts a good round into us. And you can see that his upper plate is very well angled here. Well, everything is well angled apart from that machine gun port on the T-34's hull. That is rather flat, and that allows me to penetrate him, whereas I don't think that if I'd hit outside of the machine gun port that we would have been able to penetrate that target. But what a round so far. In the first 4 minutes of this game, 2,300 damage and 3,000 spotting. This is a really good game if you're trying to push for marks on the STA-2. I didn't feel like the requirements on this tank were quite as high as I might have had on, say, the Patriot, for example. I felt that with the Patriot, unless you were getting 3,500, you would just, well, 3,500 was the break-even point of combined damage and assistance. With the STA-2, however, I felt that it was a bit lower, more towards the 3,000 mark to be able to push this tank. And that's, well, I guess, obviously that's still going to be very tricky for a lot of players, but at least compared to some of the other vehicles, it's not too hard. Now we're flanking this T-34. Hopefully we can manage to get artillery to dump on him, but it wasn't actually the artillery that did that, it was the T-95. And with 543 hit points left, I am feeling rather confident. We've spotted both of the enemy's Tier 9 tank destroyers towards the north of the map, so I'm hoping that I can flank around here, put some shots into the Leo, or alternatively, try and mop up those self-propelled guns who are most likely to still be sitting in the enemy's base. Now the STA-2, one of the things that I love about this tank is that the standard ammunition does have that decent penetration that I talked about, 212. Many of the Tier 8 premium medium tanks, such as the T-54 Mod 1 for example, I really do feel that I need to dab that 2 key more than I would want to still remain competitive again with the escalating armor. However, they recently buffed the penetration on the STA-2 but reduced its rate of fire a little bit, which obviously the good and the bad, but one thing it has done is made this tank much more profitable. And the fact that the shell cost on this vehicle is 380 and the alpha damage is 240 is rather nice indeed, and you can be exceptionally profitable. And I think it's probably one of the more profitable Tier 8 premiums in the game, especially of the mediums. And the fact that you do have those heat rounds as well, you can be competitive even when you're, I guess, breaking even on losing credits. And I think the STA-2 has to be one of the best bang for buck premium tanks that you could get your hands on. I think it's 7,400 gold. And when you think that a lot of the Tier 8 heavies are starting to cost more like 10, 11, 12,000 gold, and this vehicle I found that I can pretty much make just as many, if not more credits than I could do in my Patriot, for example. Well, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. The Patriot does have exceptionally cheap ammo and 230mm of standard penetration, which is very nice indeed. So having picked up 3 kills here, now it's just a case of trying to flank around and finish off the enemy team. Of course, there's no way to go into the cap circle when you're defending an assault, but when you're pushing for your marks of excellence, capping is probably one of the most destructive things that you could do to yourself. The only thing that you should really be trying to do when you're pushing for marks, I guess, is trying to farm as much damage as you can and also try and get as much assistance points as you can by tracking and also spotting for your allies. And if you were to cap, even if it was the only way to win the game, you're effectively just ending the game before you've had an opportunity to maybe push for that last 500, 1,000 points of assistance and damage that might make the difference between you getting your mark and not. So I spotted the Jagdtiger, and one thing you saw me do if you had eagle-eyed at the bottom of the screen was that I changed from loading a heat round to an AP round. And in retrospect, I guess maybe I was being too frugal there with my ammunition choice. My armor-piercing round bounces off the Jagdtiger. I probably would have done better if I just finished him off there. And now you see me loading heat to go after the Stridsvagn 1030, and that's because it has 40mm of armor. I can't overmatch it with my 90mm caliber gun, and so armor piercing would bounce up all the time. However, one thing that isn't going to bounce off all the time are heat rounds, because they penetrate up to 85 degrees. I think he missed me. If not, I was willing to take the risk anyway. We finish him off, picking up our 4th kill and over 7,000 combined. Great result, but it wasn't quite enough to hit my 3 mark, and we're gonna need at least one more game. So now we're on Lakeville, and when I was playing this game, I absolutely jumped for joy as I saw the enemy's team list. I saw a great opportunity here to just be a top tier medium and play aggressively. There's a complete mismatch really here on the enemy team. They don't have any high tier mediums, and I am one of them. That means that I am going to push aggressively into the fray on this map and try and dominate the center. And you're going to have to see what kind of an impact this can have. Whenever I'm in a top tier medium, I always feel like just rushing into this location. If you think you can bully the opponent, it's just absolutely incredible. Not only do you get a whole gathering of your own allies who are sitting behind you, who are going to try and assist you, but also you can just dish out so many side shots against your opponents. Now it looks like I'm going to be sharing the spotting with this T-37 here, which obviously isn't ideal, but you know, maybe he can back me up and we can try and help each other out in this location. And you saw that I paid very much attention to not bashing into the T-37 because I didn't want to bash into his vehicle, interrupt his aim, or even make him think that I'm trying to bully him out of that location. Now a KV-85 on the enemy team decides that he wants to try and push me out of this location, which when you think of it is a pretty good idea. But one thing I did do there for a split second is I bumped into that T-37, but then you saw me turn my tank to the side. I turned my tank to the side to try and let him into the gap, and I'm hoping that he doesn't doesn't feel that I was trying to prevent him from coming into this location, and it's going to be there and back again, a T-37's tail. But I'm just going to go around the corner and finish off this KB-85. Well, not quite yet. And there's a sneaky Hellcat in position, but the M44 on my team does help me out. Now we put 230 damage into him. Not exactly a high roll, but not too bad there. But oh gosh, an M12 knocks out 2 of my crew members. And I had to make a decision as I kind of cheaped out on this vehicle. I'm trying to be a little bit frugal in World of Tanks and not spend too many credits on all of these premium consumables. Especially now that you can reuse them. I feel that previously, unless you used premium consumables, when you had those awkward situations where either you lost 2 crew members or alternatively you lost your ammo rack and your tracks at the same time, and you had to decide, do I want to repair my ammo rack and then risk being killed while I'm still tracked, or shall I repair my tracks and then spend the rest of the battle as if I'm only operating at pretty much half capacity, at least with regards to my DPM output. But now with the single-use recharge, I feel that I can actually, I'm probably using more small consumables, but I'm using far less large consumables. But in that situation, of course, I'm not really having to move around too much, so it's the obvious choice to put my loader back into action and to leave my driver sitting out, you know, having a bit of a timeout for those 90 seconds that it'll take for my medkit to recharge. Now this OI reverses. I put a good shot into the front turret there. Somebody hits him as well. A little bit more spotting, but it looks like I've actually got quite a few allies there. And oh, a nice shot there into the cheeks of the OI, shutting down that tier 6 Japanese heavy. And there's that M12. I do want to get revenge on him, but I guess there's a couple of M12s, so maybe it wasn't that exact one. But considering his position, it probably was. And we've got a whole little curve of our allies here advancing along the front, but I'm also keeping an eye on what's going to be coming into base soon. And I'm thinking that this flank looks pretty much safe now, right? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 tanks and maybe some artillery support waltzing into base. Not too many tanks left alive, just an M12 and I guess an IS-6 is going to be around the corner. So I put 1 round into the IS-6 and then I decide in a couple of seconds, I believe, that I'm worried about the threat coming from the base. I ping the map. I also press the F3 key to tell my team that they should defend the base. But now that my driver's back in action, I decide that can I really trust my allies to be able to defend the base entirely themselves? Probably against a T-28 prototype and possibly an 87 as well. Well, there are 2 people in the cap circle, so it's either a 1375 or the 87 now that we know that the T-28's there as well. And I decide that using the mobility of the STA-2 and the fact that Lakeville isn't the largest of maps, that I could be able to get back myself. Now in retrospect, maybe it would have been a better idea to go after the IS-6 and help my allies to be able to take him out, because that IS-6 does go on a bit of a rampage. But considering that there are only 12 seconds left on the game, there's no way that we would have been able to take out that IS-6 and also cap out. So I think this is the correct decision. So now you see me firing the 275mm of heat pen into the side of the T-28 turret there, and I'm going to look for his cupola, but unfortunately I think it ricochets off or it doesn't quite go through the mound there. Wargaming does still have issues with modeling the side of some of those undulations that come out there, or the spurs from the mountain. But knowing that the T-28 put a shell into me, I can fire 3 shots before he can fire his second. And now this is just knowledge of using the fact that the 87's gun is not mounted in the center of the tank. I'll show you. The gun is actually mounted here on the right-hand side of the tank when he's facing me, or the left-hand side when we're looking at the vehicle. And so that means that he just can't see me, and I'm able to side-scrape, shoot the weak point on top of the vehicle, or I guess shoot the dead the T-28AT. And I just poke round the corner there, knowing that even if he hit me with his British 20-pounder, that he wasn't able to kill me with my remaining hit points. And we put a shot into his weak point to finish him off. And from here on, there's a pretty funny situation that happens towards the north of the map as I try and make my way towards the M12. The M12, I believe, kills himself by ramming the ISU-152, and then I think he fires as well in close quarters combat. Come on, buddy. Come on, do it. Do it. Do it! What you waiting for? Come on! Oh, gosh. Oh, wow, they're having a little bit of a snuggle. There you go, until the M12 kills them both, him and the enemy ISU-152, in the process, finishing off this rather great result on Lakeville. Well, when I actually look at the damage and the spotting that we did, it's a good game, but it's not like the result that we had on Corellia, right? So here's our first result on Corellia, unsurprisingly, an ace tanker for our 7k combined, patrol duty medal as well for spotting for our allies at 3,500 spotting and 1,661 base experience points. And even though we fired a couple of heat rounds towards the end of the replay to take down a higher tiered tank destroyer, we still made a whopping 114,000 credits profit, one of the reasons why I do enjoy playing the STA-2 so much. Next up, Lakeville, and this was my third mark of excellence, and I have to admit this came by a complete surprise. I wasn't specifically trying to grind for the STA-2, unlike I had done a week before previously with the Patriot. Nevertheless, this round we get a high caliber for the 3,854 damage that we dealt, and a bit of damage upon detecting as well, 1,327 with 4 kills, and I guess we make a decent profit as well. We did fire a few heat rounds towards the end of the game against the T-28 prototype, but still a cool 80,000 credits profit. So the STA-2, I think it's way up there as one of the most competitive and profitable tier 8 premium medium tanks in the game. I think this, it's a close fight between this and the Revolurise, considering that thing gets such cheap, awesome 390 alpha damage. And I think because when the STA-2 was first introduced into the game and it was rather lackluster, a lot of people are just not considering now, and with the buffs that the vehicle has received in the last few patches, it's really looking like a good choice and an economical one as well, with the fairly low base gold price. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving it a like, I'd really appreciate it. And let me know in the comments what you think about the STA-2 and if you have any tips and tricks for other STA-2 drivers out there as to how they can get the most out of this vehicle. And as always, thank you so much for watching, you've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.